Straight ahead, new protections. President Joe Biden unveils a new executive action that offers work permits and a path to citizenship. We look at whether this will help the president politically and potential fallout. Fighting back, how a new bill by Senator Ted Cruz makes it a crime to create and spread non-consensual, deepfake, sexually explicit videos and photos. Why a North Texas teenage victim and her mother are speaking out. Facing off with the big debate between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump days away, we ask how either of them can win when many polls show most people have already made up their minds. Good Sunday morning to you. I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics starts now. Hello and welcome to Eye on Politics. Hope you're having a great weekend. We begin with new protections the Biden administration is offering to about 500,000 people who are in the U.S. illegally and who are married to American citizens. Those who qualify must have lived in the U.S. for at least 10 years as of last Monday. The program will offer a streamlined path to permanent residency and eventually citizenship. Those who qualify will be able to stay in the U.S. during the application process, which will shield them from being deported and allow them to obtain work permits.
The Statue of Liberty is not some relic of American history. It still stands for who we are. I also refuse to believe that for us to continue to be America that embraces immigration, we have to give up securing our border. They're false choices.
Former president and presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump slammed the idea while campaigning in Wisconsin last week.
He's going to formally grant a mass amnesty to millions of illegal aliens that came into our country.
As you might expect, reaction fell along party lines. Republicans criticized the new program while Democrats celebrated it.
This is keeping families together. And quite frankly, it's just a continuation of the president doing work that the Republicans should have done.
So it's not amnesty. Look, Americans have to finally stand up and say, we've been asking for some solution. This is a solution.
If it's possible to make things worse, he did it today. This is nothing more than a magnet that will actually increase illegal immigration.
This is what the Border Patrol calls a pull factor. It's like a magnet attracting people into the United States who know that if they wait long enough, President Biden will find some way to allow them to stay in the United States.
President Biden made the announcement at the White House 12 years after former President Barack Obama unveiled a program called DACA, which allowed about 500,000 people who came to the U.S. as young children, so-called dreamers, to stay and not face deportation. Juan Carlos Cerda was just 3 years old when he came to the U.S. with his parents.
As a DACA recipient myself, the 12th anniversary of DACA is very special because DACA allowed me to legally work, to legally drive, and to start a career, have a family, and own a home.
The DACA program itself is still tied up in the courts all these years later. Here's Sarah Jenkins with this week's brief.
Individuals with DACA are currently protected from deportation under the DACA rule. However, since 2021, first-time DACA requests have been blocked. In July 2021, a federal judge in Texas ruled the DACA memorandum was illegal. And in September 2023, the same judge ruled that the Biden administration's final DACA rule was illegal. The ruling made DACA unlawful for new participants, but allowed it to continue for current recipients, also known as dreamers. Dreamers and those whose DACA has lapsed for less than a year can continue to renew their DACA and work authorization. The ruling against DACA has been appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court. However, based on the court's previous rulings, it will likely rule DACA unlawful. If that happens, the case will likely be appealed up to the Supreme Court.
The new program is based on a provision of existing immigration law called Parole in Place. We spoke with Paul Hunker, former legal counsel for ICE in Dallas, and he told us there is a difference between this program and DACA.
This is more firmly grounded in the Immigration and Nationality Act. The president clearly has parole power. So one of the problems with DACA, which we're seeing in court, is court judges saying that the president, the administration doesn't have authority to do what it did.
President Biden's announcement comes in an election year and 2 weeks after he unveiled another executive order to reduce illegal immigration. It effectively shuts down asylum between the legal ports of entry when the number of encounters with migrants on the southern border reaches a certain threshold. We spoke with SMU political science professor Matthew Wilson about the potential political fallout and why this is happening in the first place.
These are really two moves in opposite directions on the immigration question. The first, and the more significant in terms of border control, really was in response to the widespread public perception that there's chaos at the southern border. And this had become a real political liability for Joe Biden. It was an issue where Donald Trump consistently polled better than Biden in terms of his ability to handle the border. And so I think Biden felt like he had no choice but to act and to at least send a signal that he's taking border security more seriously. But when he did that, he got considerable pushback from people on the left flank of the Democratic Party. And so I think this liberalization of the policies for those who are married to U.S. citizens is an attempt to tamp down some of that discontent on his left flank.
Does this move the needle and help President Biden, or does it move the needle and only help former President Trump?
Well, thus far in this race, we've seen that very little moves the needle much at all. The race is really locked in, quite stable, and really no matter what happens, no matter what either Trump or Biden does or says, they remain in the polls within a couple of points of each other. Now, all that said, whether the border crackdown helps Biden at all depends on what its effects are. 2-3 months from now, do we see a substantially diminished number of people being essentially paroled into the United States? Can Biden point to real numbers and say, look, we really have meaningfully decreased the migrant flows with this policy? Or, as his critics say, does it turn out to all be theater and that it doesn't make a meaningful dent in the number of people coming into this country? The jury is still out on that. With regard to the liberalization for the spouses of U.S. citizens, I do think that will help to ease some of the criticism on his left flank, but that's not really what Biden has to worry about politically. Leftists in the Democratic Party can make a lot of noise, but they're not voting for Donald Trump. And at the end of the day, they hate Donald Trump so much that it's hard to imagine them even staying home. So I think politically, Biden has more to worry about in the center of the electorate than he does on the left.
Professor Wilson says down the road he'll be looking to see if the poll numbers regarding border security and immigration change in either candidate's direction. Coming up a little later, we preview the upcoming debate between President Biden and former President Trump and how one expert explains how they can move the needle politically when so many people have already made up their minds. But next, a new bill to combat revenge porn, deepfake sexually explicit videos and photos. Why a North Texas teenage victim and her mom are speaking out when Eye on Politics returns. Welcome back to Eye on Politics. A new poll out Thursday showed the latest snapshot on the presidential race and the contest for U.S. Senate here in Texas. The UT Austin Texas Politics Project shows that in a head-to-head matchup, former president and presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump leads President Joe Biden by 7 percentage points, 46 to 39%. The poll shows in a 5-way race, Trump's lead increases to 9 percentage points, 43 to 34%, with independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at 8% and Jill Stein and Cornel West at 2% each. And in the U.S. Senate race in Texas, which of course is the marquee race in the Lone Star State this fall, two-term Republican incumbent Ted Cruz leads Democratic North Texas Congressman Colin Allred by 11 percentage points, 45 to 34%. 20% are undecided and 6% say they want someone else. The research director at the Texas Politics Project, Dr. Joshua Blank, tells me the 20% undecided shows that it's still early in the race and that Allred is still largely unknown across the state, even among Democrats. This past week, Senator Cruz introduced a bipartisan bill with Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota called the Take It Down Act. It would make it a felony to create and distribute non-consensual intimate photos or videos, real and fake. It's a problem that directly impacted one North Texas teenager.
It was really terrifying.
Elliston Berry says she was devastated last October when friends at Aledo High School first told her nude photos of her were being shown to other students on campus.
It was really scary for me and my friends, and as these photos continued to go around, it created so much anxiety, and I didn't even want to attend school just out of fear that these photos would get brought up in class, or who knows.
It turns out a 15-year-old boy at the school took photos from her social media and used AI to manipulate the photo showing her face, but someone else's nude body. She wasn't the only victim. Aledo ISD says the boy was disciplined and he was punished in the juvenile justice system, according to the Parker County District Attorney.
We've got to change things. Things have to change.
Anna McAdams is Berry's mother. We spoke with both of them along with Senator Ted Cruz after they appeared at a news conference at the U.S. Capitol, where Cruz outlined his new bill to put a stop to the problem. McAdams says she knew she had to speak out and reached out to Cruz's office.
I don't think it was very hard to decide to do that as a mother when I realized I couldn't really protect Elliston. And in this situation, with what happened, it was totally out of our control.
It appears totally realistic that you can't tell that it's not a real picture, you can't tell that it's not a real video, and that is horrifically traumatizing and abusive.
Under the measure, it would be a federal crime to make and share these deepfake videos and photos, real and fake. If convicted, the penalty would be up to 2 years in prison if the victim is an adult and up to 3 years in prison if the victim is underage.
Thousands of young people have been victims of this.
The bill also would require social media companies to take down the images within 48 hours after being notified by the victim. Cruz says in Berry's case, he was surprised to hear Snapchat kept the photos of her up for months until his office called.
And within 24 hours, they pulled the images down. Now, frankly, it should not take an elected member of Congress having to intervene.
The hard thing for me is, as a parent, again, wanting to protect my child, knowing that they could resurface when she goes to college, when she goes to get a job. My hope in doing this is that this is what is brought up. What we're trying to do to help others.
Berry says she's hopeful and encouraged the bill will make a difference.
And it's really creating a relief knowing that if someone, minor or adult, to release images like this or create them, that they would get punished and that people who are victims will get justice.
The Senate Commerce Committee, in which Cruz is the ranking Republican, will be holding a hearing on this issue Wednesday at the University of North Texas in Dallas. Cruz told me he thinks the chances of his bill passing are very positive because it's bipartisan and all 6 Republicans and 6 Democrats are co-sponsoring. A separate but similar bill has been introduced in the House. McAdams is also hoping state lawmakers take action on this as well. As for Congressman Allred, he's continuing to press abortion rights as a major issue in the Senate race. During a virtual campaign conversation last Wednesday, Allred spoke with members of the Amarillo Reproductive Freedom Alliance, who recently fought back against a proposed ban in the city of Amarillo that would have made it illegal to travel on city roads to head out of state for an abortion. That proposal was defeated. Dr. Austin Denard, a Dallas OBGYN who had to travel out of state to get an abortion because of Texas's near ban on the procedure, also took part in this conversation.
I want y'all to know that as your senator, I will restore Roe v. Wade at the federal level and end this extreme abortion ban that we are dealing with here in Texas. And I'll always stand up for women's freedom to get access to the health care that they need close to home and without fear of criminalization.
I just can't be silent anymore. And I'm so appreciative to have Congressman Allred and our other representatives who care. They truly care about what's happening to women and what's happening to families in Texas.
We were motivated by Dobbs being overturned. We joined whatever abortion advocacy network we could. And coincidentally, we found that this ordinance was something that we could tangibly fight.
Right now, there aren't the 60 votes needed to pass a bill codifying Roe v. Wade in the Senate, and the same is likely true after the November election. Newly elected Dallas County GOP chair, retired Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, is calling for an independent audit of the Dallas County Elections Department. During a news conference Tuesday, West said the audit would be aimed at ensuring whether the Elections Department is following state law and election code, along with its own operating procedures and processes. West said it's not about a forensic audit to question election results.
I think that ultimately in our system and our representative democracy is about checks and balances. Well, the people need to also have a check and balance as well on government agencies.
In response, Dallas County Democratic Party Chair Cardall Coleman tells CBS News Texas that West should learn more about how the Elections Department works first before calling for an independent audit. Coleman says he worries an audit would be a distraction in an election year. A spokesman for the Dallas County Elections Department declined comment. Coming up next, the first big debate between President Biden and former President Trump takes place in just 4 days. Why this debate stands apart from the past and how it could move the political needle for one of the candidates. When Eye on Politics comes right back. Now to the big debate this Thursday night between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. It's the first time they will be face-to-face in 4 years. While all presidential debates are historic, this one sets itself apart for a number of reasons. It's the earliest one. Mics will be cut off for the person not speaking, and there won't be a studio audience. We spoke with Dr. Ben Voth, professor of debate at SMU.
Yeah, this is a very different presidential debate, largely unprecedented. Having it so early has a lot of impact on the convention process that's still not happened yet for both of these candidates. And it engages the public at such an early date. It's a bit surprising.
How do the rules benefit or detract from each candidate?
Well, I do think that the Biden team has largely gotten the best benefit out of the rules. And so, for example, the biggest rule that's in effect here is about cutting off the mic. Now, that's not completely new. They did start doing that in 2020. But what happened in the first debate of 2020 was such a debacle where they were both interrupting each other so much that everybody sort of realized, like, we've got to have this thing where we cut off the mic. And to be honest, President Trump does like to interrupt Biden and people that are talking. Historically, Biden has also done that. If you actually look at some of his vice presidential debates, like in 2012, he's done some similar things, but it's going to put a limit on Trump interrupting something that Biden says, and, you know, potentially Biden the same thing. Now, not having a studio audience, I also think, you know, that's a new rule. I think that's going to help the Biden team as well. There's going to be less distractions for the president, and so for President Biden, and so he'll be able to engage the questioner more directly without distractions. And there wouldn't be the kind of thing that President Trump gets at a lot of his rallies, where the public kind of roars and makes a noise or claps or approves, that kind of dynamic that he typically has thrived on in the past few weeks and months. That won't really be in play in kind of a studio setting like this.
Who stands more to lose? Who stands more to gain?
Right, that's such a great question, because normally the incumbent has everything to lose by having a debate. But both of these candidates have said, hey, let's do it. And even Biden was kind of really tough about it, like, hey, I'll just meet you anytime, let's do this. And I think both of them do have negative numbers where people dislike them. And so the strange thing is that they are still challengers in the sense of trying to restore kind of the higher approval numbers that they both lack. And so there is a tricky thing here. I think for Biden, there's a desire to really secure his nomination before the convention and make the Democrats feel comfortable that he is their nominee. And for Trump, I think there's kind of an idea of precluding the problems that may arise out of these trials and these convictions that he's faced.
The polls are close, even in the battleground states. Because both are incumbents, they've been at this stage before, with the cake being baked largely, so to speak. How does either candidate move the needle and actually win a debate?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And the data is actually, I think, true. What we've seen so far is that 2% or less of the public is really movable on these debates. Now, what I think is missed in this analysis is kind of what I would call mobilization and demobilization. You can get into a situation where people who were thinking about voting for you decide not to. And they might have been reporting and polling like, hey, I prefer this candidate. But actually going out the door and casting that ballot, that does require some effort, and it could be that in watching a debate that voters would say, yeah, I'm not motivated by that. And for both of them, they obviously have established voting bases that have elected them previously. And so what we're really looking at is what are sometimes referred to rhetorically as the base appeals, trying to get your base to turn out.
What are you expecting? Is this going to be nasty, drag out, punches thrown constantly?
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever seen so much rhetorical antagonism stored up, you know, and so there's like these giant dams of anger that they both clearly have for each other, and then you put them on a stage together, it's hard to imagine that it won't be raucous and difficult.
Get your popcorn ready for Thursday night. Before we go, we want to mark the passing of a longtime political science professor at UT Arlington, Dr. Alan Sachs. He was 85. Sachs taught for 54 years, and our photojournalists and I always enjoyed interviewing him to get his sense of how the issues and the different political races resonated with voters. He was a kind and generous man who is said to have donated more than $1 million to the university and the Arlington community at large. As one person at UT Arlington told me, he left an unending legacy. That's all for Eye on Politics this week. I'm Jack Fink. I am listening, and we are listening at CBS News Texas. I hope to see you again next week. And from all of us, have a great Sunday.